Let's try to wait for a few minutes until more students come. And some students ask about the PPT slides that is updated yesterday or last time. I'm going to upload after today's lecture and a tutorial. I think we can start. We have around 78. More students will come along during the process. So after, last sectors, we have introduced the housing bubbles, the housing in the last, lectures. And we have introduced the public housing finance, and also the determinants for state intervention. Today, we are going to introduce the second part for public housing finance. Let me share my screen. 1 second. I think you can see my screen at the moment. Let me try to. We are going to introduce the approaches on housing subsidies. We all understand a subsidy, and when we try to understand, you might have some gut feeling that subsidy means to provide some incentives. Like this time, when Hong Kong has been experiencing the COVID-19, the Hong Kong government has really, provided the cash subsidy as several installment for their Hong Kong residents. So we can just, taking this to try to give further thoughts that we would say a subsidy is considered as an incentive provided by the government to enable and persuade a certain class of producers or consumers to do something that they would not otherwise do. So this approach could help lower the opportunity cost or otherwise increase substantial benefit for doing so, If we try to use agriculture sector as example to show what is the rationale for subsidy, what is the rationale for subsidy agriculture. So accordingly, we will say a subsidy is a payment by the government to a producer to cover part of the cost of production. So firstly, they should have this, we say the, producer, and then they should have the allocated payment from the government. And also it is the cost for the production need to be covered. So that's what we say the rationale of subsidy. When the government buys the surplus produced by the farmers, it would provide them with a subsidy. So this is normally when we say agricultural sector have met with, the poverty in terms of the, their industry production efficiency. Comparatively speaking, since the civilization has incurred, a subsidy has become, a important, way that we would say that could alleviate the payment from, solving the problems. Given the surplus produced, the farms would not cover their cost without a subsidy. So if you see the right-hand side, figure 1 shows how would a price support works in the market for sugar beets. And this is how, according to the quantity and quality of this. So, and then that is how when without the price in the agriculture, we say the sugar beets market, the competitive equilibrium price is considered is $25 a ton. And 25 million tons a year are grown. So this is the first one. If we say without price support or with no price support, you can see this is. Secondly, a price support is set at $35 a ton. So this is another setting, $35 a ton. And the quantity produced is 30 million tons a year, according to the 35 tons. And that quantity produced is considered as this 30 million tons. So the quantity bought by domestic users is 20 million tons a year. So this is quantity that we really say the board. The government would prefer to buy the surplus of 10 million tons at 35, it's even higher. So that is, we say a subsidy that is 350. So this is how they would try to give, a subsidy by per year. And in this case, a dead weight loss arises, dead loss with. So that is how we would say state intervention would bring along the subsidy and would, subsidize the public benefits and then try to alleviate the loss from private sectors, in particular for the agricultural sectors. You'll know that every year when the farmers meet with some typhoons or even we say medical or even some, problems that would find such kind of, actions from the government. So at this moment, the price support would increase farmers' revenue. And with no price support, farmers would receive 625 billion. So that is, we said 25 multiplied by, just now you see 25 multiplied by 25. So this is how we would see the price will receive 625 billion. So with the price support, farmers would receive 1,050 billion. So that's 30 multiplied by 35, right? This is 1050. And secondly, the price support is inefficient because it creates dead weight loss, which means the farmers would gain and the buyers would lose. But we would say from that weight triangle, we show from that, we would definitely find that sometimes in some occasions, the buyers will lose more than the farmers gain. So if you check out this, the buyers would lose more than the farmers gain. So that is what we say is very efficiency production space or efforts has been produced. Within this comparison, we can easily find what do we mean by the subsidies loss and what is the inefficiency of this. We all understand this would bring along effects on the rest of the world. So the rest of the world would receive a double whammy from the price support. So once we all understand if they have the import and export restrictions for international trading activities. So once the import restrictions in advanced economy deny the developing economies accessibility to food markets in the advanced economies. So they would set up this import restrictions. So the result would become lower prices and smaller farmer productions in the developing countries. in the developing countries. And so in the advanced economies, we say if they sell their surpluses on the world market, it would lower the price of farmer products in the rest of the world even further. So that's the two effects to the rest of the world. I think some students did not I think some students didn't put all the, let me check. Someone didn't. Some student didn't. You hear me? Yes, right. You can hear me, right? Still, okay, good. Just I heard some noise from the background of some students, so that's I'm not quite sure. Okay, let's keep on going. So we have introduced about agriculture as an example to the effects and to the way. And then if we get back to the topic of housing subsidy, we would say the housing subsidies are considered as government funding to aid the lower income tenants in renting the housing. And subsidies are often defined by whether the subsidy is given to the landlord. And then the criteria are usually set for the tenants that they can lease to, or whether the subsidy is given to the tenants, which is typically considered as a renter, and they are allowed to find suitable private housing. And the subsidy amount is typically based upon the tenant's income, but we can find some other formulas has been also used to try to develop such kind of interesting, we say, formulas in the mathematical method. So if we try to give housing subsidy a name, we would try to give things like, well, first and foremost, it must give some preferential treatment to housing. So any measure that would generally reduce the production or consumption costs rather than specifically reduce the housing production or consumption costs is not a housing subsidy. So we can see a lot of measures which have encouraged their investment in all types of building, including the offices, shops, and factories, and the dwellings, etc. So they are not housing subsidies. So the second question is why housing subsidy? Well, this is a video I would like to share if you try to give why does
most people, when they have studied the impact of subsidized housing, what I mean by that is any kind of place-based housing that receives government subsidies. Most of the research is focused on the benefits that are enjoyed by the individual tenants, the people who actually get to live in that housing. But what we're focusing on instead is the benefits that are potentially delivered to the neighborhood. When the public housing program was first enacted in the late 1930s, these neighborhood benefits were actually a key part of the justification. Proponents argued that these investments could make a neighborhood more attractive, more desirable, and ultimately make more people want to live there. It turns out that identifying the impacts, the neighborhood impacts of subsidized housing is quite difficult. First of all, it's difficult to simply measure and quantify neighborhood improvements. When you think about community solidarity, social capital, aesthetics, and even public safety. These are things that are difficult to capture. But what we did was we focused on property values, because to the extent that a neighborhood becomes a more desirable place to live, those improvements should be capitalized into the value of properties. If a neighborhood's more desirable, basically people will be willing to pay more to live there. A second fundamental challenge, I think, is that one never knows what would have happened in these neighborhoods in the absence of these investments. And essentially, you have to figure out, you have to make some assumptions, as all statistical models do, about the counterfactual. And so what we assume intuitively is that property values in the small ring surrounding subsidized housing would have appreciated in value at the same rate as comparable properties that are still in the same neighborhood but were somewhat further away from the subsidized housing. What we found, I think, counter to the conventional wisdom, significant positive spillover effects on the surrounding communities. We found that properties in the near vicinity, in very close proximity to subsidized housing, actually appreciated at a more rapid rate. That these housing investments really did, as developers claimed, seem to help to transform their neighborhoods. And the magnitude of those benefits was significant. In fact, so much so that our estimates suggest that the city had the potential to actually probably recouped a good deal of its initial investments through increased property tax revenues.
Yeah, this one really showing the basic and some issues you might be try to give some potential implications from how and why and the rationale from that. We all understand the whole world. We say it experience a rapidly rising inequality, including a lot of the European countries, and also including a lot of global regions and Hong Kong, for example. And this inequality and private housing markets have been, represented by the market housing costs, which are increasingly out of reach for low, moderate, middle-income households, for example. And 95% of Canadians have choose to live in homes in private ownership or rental markets, etc. So this is how we see the rental markets of private, housing matters. So there are lots of rationale and motivations for housing subsidy. Firstly, they come to use housing subsidy to improve this public house. And this second point is to improve the fairness and justice, and to influence the economic and political stability. So this another agenda is trying to overcome market inefficiency that may yield monopoly profits or poor housing quality or inefficient volume of new or low income construction, and which we would say that could not be solved through the regulations, etc. And last but not least is how to stimulate the economic growth. So in order to increase their efficiency, for example, to minimize the resources costs and allocate the resources to their highest valued uses, and to meet the distributional objectives by increasing the opportunities. And in this context, a much fairer, more fairer, distribution of income would generate it. So this is one of the important how to increase the total efficiency, right? The second one is a political system that would influence the subsidy design. So the majority of the occasions, subsidies are initiated in response to specific microeconomic or social situations. So this is how the housing subsidies would try to be based upon. So that's what we say. Sometimes, according to the cartoon, said that we may need a lot of affordable housing, just as long as it doesn't come at expenses on affordable housing. So this ironic comic, which has really reflected the essence of sometimes the affordable housing has become even more unaffordable, according to a group of people. Well, and that in terms of public services, well, we have a lot of besides the housing sectors, education, right, medical resources. You see this outbreak of COVID-19. Hong Kong's medical services has been become collaborated nearly, but I'm not quite sure whether we will have a lot of support from mainland China government, but in Guangdong. But I'm quite sure that all these interventions from resources, from medical, housing, or education, then need some interventions, because that's what we say: when market fail, government should intervene. So in all the societies, including a lot of developing countries or developed countries, almost all the societies would choose to intervene in the housing markets through the array of policies and subsidies intended to stimulate the housing production or consumption by various growths. So then the next focus would be, what about the subsidy approaches? Well, suppose we have different subsidy approaches. The supply side would be to subsidize housing directly. There are sometimes we say named as object subsidies. Pure object subsidies do not discriminate according to who consumes the housing. In the practical terms, most supply side subsidies for housing in European countries would have been conditional object subsidies. So these have been a significant means of supporting the social rented housing. So they are generally needed when the input markets do not work well. So the downside is that they often have to exercise some potential strategies to distort the normal market rules. So that's the traditional and historical argument between the institutional markets and the business market and private markets, etc. And second one would be in kind. So that is what we usually said for the supply side. If we demand the supply side, if we go to last one, the supply side, if we subsidy housing directly by producing a lot of affordable housing or public housing, this is in kind. And the second one is in cash. That is the demand side, to subsidize the consumers. So these consumers are usually considered more efficient, and they can only be applied in segments of the housing market that would work reasonably well. For example, when the markets respond to an increase in demand by producing more housing in the desired category. And thirdly, if the supply markets are non-responsive, the demand side subsidies benefit lenders or the developers. This would turn into supply side subsidies. And so this is what we say the demand side. So the government would provide the housing assistance in terms of cash directly or indirectly in order to allow the lower income group to pay the market rent or enter into the private market. So this is a government, issues that would usually exercise in cash. At fundamental level, if we try to build up a principle, so we would say the state would usually or generally would provide, a kind of, issues or matters that would target group with a sum of money to use for buying a house in a way that see the best. So this is at principle level. This is perhaps potentially the most efficient and transparent subsidy as the size of grant is clear. And the use of the subsidy is listly constant, and we can see very little distortion to the market. So at the practical terms, the assistance will come with strings, such as buying a newly constructed house at a specific location, or it would be tied to borrowing, so which would become difficult to implement. So this is a principle at fundamental level. We do find a lot of pros and cons for such kind of, housing approaches that would has been, initiated as time goes on. We would say the cost is transparent and the budgeted allocation can be or could be made transparent. Like we say this discussion when we say of equity, and it can be used to encourage their savings. And the beneficiary evaluation tend to be closer to the market costs. So this is pros. And the cons would the yearly tie in to the non-market new housing with the debatable resale value and perhaps dubious locations. And they may also require the non-market finance to make it feasible. So this is between the pros and the cons. And if we try to use the cases in Housg and South Africa, the Housg pioneered this, but had to rely on the state-sponsored lending to make it work. And South Africa did so on a massive scale, but relied on the free land and infrastructure and first come, first served allocation. And that did not integrate any financial markets. And there have a lot of more cases, but here's that one is in Germany. Well, we would see that Germany would offer, all the first come and first time home buyers a grant, which is can spreading over 8 years and could help the down payment with financing. So we can see there's no redistribution, but could become much better than the other subsidies to the middle class ownership. So this is 2 cases. By employing the case, we can see that there are several interesting tributes that can be summarized here. So by use of the capital granted by the government, all the eligible tenants would become allowable to pay on the market rate. And any kind of in-kind subsidy tends to help not only the beneficiary, but also the producers of the favored commodity. So the value of an in-kind benefit would depend on the price charged for the housing sectors. So when the government undercharges for something, the housing unit subsidy, it would become, considered equal to the difference between the price paid and the market price. when it charges a market price, the transaction is considered commercial as a subsidy. So this is all the in-kind. But for those who receive the cash, okay, housing, they may not, but this is a potential risk, which is very high potential risk that they will spend this housing subsidy, on the other sectors rather than housing. I'll give you an example. Some people would choose to use as kind of a subsidy for buying cars, and they also sometimes for spending this for even gambling or luxuries rather than on housing. So this is in how to say, we cannot control and we cannot regulate, and you cannot even know. This is our own, purchasing right, human rights, so who will care once this cash was, spent and give? So that leaves all the consumers great freedom to buy anything that they want to buy. So in this way, we will easily say that the housing program of having people living in inadequate housing may still remain, despite the provision of housing subsidy. As a way of improvement, another form of housing vouchers and rent rebates to allow the needy to rent adequate housing in the private market. So this is another form we can easily fund. Housing vouchers. This is usually provided to tenants, and tenants would or may aid many upon of that. They would choose the rules of take one and then take all. And this method would still restrict the contracts and tenants' rights. But clearly, we can see quite a lot more efficient in production and consumption. I want to leave the question, why we can see it more efficient in production and consumption? Okay, think about this question. And for housing vouchers, suppose that could be more become equivalent to cash. What if the voucher is less than the amount that the household would choose to spend on housing? Then the voucher is equivalent to cash. And the recipient simply replaces some portion of his own funds, and that would have gone to housing with a voucher. So this is housing vouchers. Wow, another important chapter of today's lecture would to compare these two approaches. Well, if we see that we have found 7 chapters for compare of these two approaches here. Well, first was the quality control, and then second is the quality in terms of stability in relieving the housing rent burden. So this is second comparison, and effectiveness for the housing. The gross subsidy and freedom of choices, and then administrative simplicity. So this is 6 chapters, and then finally would be efficiency of the chapters. So when we try to come into the cases of that, the impact of this case that we would easily find is to say how would the cash subsidy would bring along the quantity and quality of housing become would be impacted, and whether it would be passive or it is negative, or is direct or indirect. And obviously, relatively, we would say that according to the relative term, a cash subsidy would become more passive, because just we cannot control, as we said, behaviors of purchases. People would choose to buy anything that they want. And the low monetary assistance is restricting the choice of private housing market, resulting the target markets, which is mainly based on the aging and underdeveloped neighborhoods, which is characterized with a lack of building facilities and poor environment, etc. So the government can directly improve the quality of the housing stock, improve and preserve the quality and amenities of the neighborhood. And we can see quite a lot of the provision positive externalities and also as a public goods in this context. So this is how the first chapter we try to see when we touch the point of quality control. And here are the housing authorities, they have established some public housing buildings in their estates. You can see this is some architecture style that see become even better facility amenities. Well, second chapter would be, we say, in some of the other cases, voucher, in terms of cash, meanings, would see the greater improvement in their neighborhood conditions, and then do the public housing recipients. For example, using the data from 1990 census, the Newman and Schenker has concluded that project-based assistance programs do little to improve the quality of recipients' neighborhoods. And in the case of public housing, it appeared to make things significantly worse. Well, the certificate and voucher in cash programs, but reduce, the probability at the family who live in the most economically and socially distressed areas. So this is quality control. And second chapter would be the objective in stability in relieving the rent burden. For the in-kind subsidies, it is directly supplied by the government to poor people. And a low rent policy is meant to reduce the burden of the lower income people. And the public government can directly improve the quality of the housing stock by improving and preserving the quality and amenities of the neighborhoods. And secondly, is the amount of in-cash subsidies is not enough to cover the cost of housing of the poor as expected due to the fluctuation in the housing market. So this is the second concern. And the effectiveness, this is also another touching point we would try to think, is for in-cash subsidy. The financial instability is considered as a major potential problem for a housing allowance program. And the subsidies may be used to the undesirable goods, for example, the gambling. And this is unpredictable, as I advance again. People do have different characters and their personalities and made their behaviors behave to take in different forms. So at this moment, the in-cash subsidy become out of control. But at fundamental terms, we would say that in-cash subsidy should be employed in those mostly needy or needy groups. So, and in-kind subsidies also has become a direct subsidy to those tenants, the less linked to the market. So you can really provide the meaning of subsidy to the most needy groups. That is effective, but how to test that? How to make sure that it would be? Well, if not every qualified household is to receive housing subsidy, who is to be preferred? The neediest, or those who will be helped the most by the assistance, or those for whom assistance will do the most for the housing system as a whole. And the most deserving, like we say, the working poor or the elderly or single, elderly, etc. Or the groups with special problems like disabled, handicapped, etc., etc. And perhaps, distribute housing assistance through lottery. So this is by the luckiness. So that is, we say, a preferring group. There are many terms or differences for this. Well, if we try to give this a point, and then we can try to make sure that it become more efficient. I think that some of the recordings didn't touched for some of the, I'm not quite sure you missed this, but let me try to repeat this paragraph. That if not every qualified household is to receive housing subsidy, and who is to be preferred. And the gross subsidy equals to the opportunity cost of using the lands plus the building cost and minus the amount paid by the recipients, right? So this is two important issues that we try to, calculate. And generally speaking, the building cost is pretty high for in-kind subsidies, including all the land design and construction and maintenance cost. And these costs are more than, we say, only providing, we say, if we try to give this a specific messages, and that is what we say, the building cost or the design, that land, all of this will be considered building cost. So this costs are more than only providing a living area, but sometimes the whole area's development. And the cost of in-cash subsidy is the amount of money directly paid. So this is gross subsidy. For the in-cash subsidy approach, what we're going to try to give is how should we and how will we to try to provide the housing allowance system that is could be become the another opportunity channel that can give lower income household a new freedom to find the housing of its own choices. So it can be flexible, personalized, portable, and directly to the lower income households. So for the in-kind subsidy, the recipients are given very little choice with respect to location, size, and other characteristics of the in-kind housing unit that they have been assigned. So although the building forms of public housing are designed as standard, different tenants, we say with different situation, will be treated as the same. So try to make this kind of a interesting, comparison while comparing with in-cash and in-kind. We will easily find residents have little choice because they have to be restricted to particular location, like in some, like new territory, or even some far away places. And all the size and the other characteristics of the in-kind housing unit would be assigned. So this is become the freedom of choices. And when we touch the administrative simplicity, for the in-cash subsidy, the government has to update periodically the amount of subsidies to keep the purchase power constant, which is generally influenced by the short-term economic fluctuation and political instability. So this is one point of matter. The second one is for the in-kind subsidy. The government have to keep a huge bureaucracy to build the public housing, and it may involve the high administrative cost in management and maintenance as well. So any in-cash subsidy is become more and more efficient because it can provide small amount of cost, that is gross subsidy, in order to gain the some level of utility. Utility as well is satisfaction level, satisfaction degree, and these were treated as in-kind subsidy. To put it another way, any in-cash subsidy that would attain the same or even higher level of the gross, we say the satisfaction or utility level with the same amount of gross subsidy as in-kind subsidy. So when we try to ask you, what do you think of the inefficiency of in-kind subsidy? We would say it become, we say hinged or by the distortion of price and distortion of consumption pattern and the production inefficiency in the public sectors. That's inefficiency or efficiency. And when we touch upon the price distorting subsidies, well, we would say that the price distorting subsidies would lower the price of particular goods relative to other goods for eligible people. So this is price distorting subsidies. And then if we try to put the figure here, this is the first installment of the equilibrium line here, E1 at H1 point and got N1, so equilibrium. The second line is equilibrium at H3 with N2. And between, the first N10 and N20, and we can deduct the subsidy here. So that is between E1 and E2, the efficiency. So once we touch upon those two lines, we can generate the two, U1 and the U2. And even when we go past the same U2, and we can go through, get another line curve based upon the each, and got a U3, utility line 3. So for this one, we can come out with N30, right? That is the point that we want to say. How to make a judgment whether income subsidy is more efficient or inefficient, clearly, that may produce more inefficiency during the process. Because it is, in terms of market regulations, the freedom of market rules has been interrupted somehow. And we could not deny that as state intervention or housing subsidy approaches, it can provide the other public goods and positive externalities, like better design and better public facilities or accessibilities, MTR, for example, the minibus or bus stations, also a lot of planning policies, allocation population, etc., etc. So these are good. I cannot deny. But if you try to think about theoretically and why and how it is more efficient in terms of this figure. So I want to draw attention. Why do you think that the in-cash subsidy or in-kind subsidy, which is more inefficient, which one is and why? Okay, I want to leave the question for you. Let's try to give you some an example of the Canada. The new HB agreement on April 29, the Ontario signed a new Canada-Ontario Affordable Housing Program agreement with the federal government. And this new agreement would provide $602 million over the next 4 years to increase supply of affordable housing in Ontario. And the total amount invested in affordable housing in Ontario by the federal, provincial, and municipal governments will be at least $734 million over the life of the program. And this program will fund 15,000 affordable housing units and 5,000 housing allowance to the housing in need. And the AHP is a partnership initiatives among, firstly, the federal and provincial governments who would provide equity contributions, like the grants, the development charge waivers, and set the overall AHP framework. Second one is municipal service managers that would try to produce, procure, deliver, and administer the HP, and who would provide equity contributions or operating assistance to affordable housing projects. And last but not least is the proponent of affordable housing that include municipalities, municipal nonprofits, private for-profits, and private nonprofits that would build, own, operate, and finance housing units. So this is one figures I would try to give you for your possible and after class figure out how does a pilot program rental and supporting program housing, the housing ownership, and nursing part would become a reality. And this is now the housing allowance program that they try to commit. They built 80 million as Canada dollars of federal funding to finance 5-year housing allowance program, which is designed to assist the 500 lower income households take advantages of high vacancy rates in the current market. In August 2000, Minister of MAH announced the distribution of units and funding allocation to the service managers. I want to spend another around 15 minutes in the first coming day to try to give you another chapter of this issues about the housing subsidy. I want to try to take around 10 minutes 10 minutes break. So if possible, we come back after 7:40. So let's come back to the course again. Let me try to share the screen. About the housing subsidy in Hong Kong. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, the demand for better housing rose among both the private and public housing tenants as the economic conditions continued to improve following the opening of China. I would say the opening reform China since after 1978. So this issue has become another interesting kind of the reality that we can see that the point we would say almost all the societies intervene in housing markets through an array of policies and subsidies intend to stimulate housing production or consumption by various groups. So if we see there are lots of in-cash subsidy schemes in Hong Kong, that the home purchase loan scheme and home assistance loan scheme and rent rebate and mortgage guarantee scheme to keep the higher portion of mortgages and the tax relief. And we can see quite a lot of this subsidy or repayment methods for this housing, platforms of here. And we can see the in-kind housing subsidy in Hong Kong that may include the public rental housing, the home ownership scheme, a tenant's purchase scheme, and my home purchase plan. These are all the objectives and main schemes for public housing schemes. The main objective of home ownership schemes have the main objectives like they enhance the social stability and the sense of belongings and the quality of living in terms of improvement and enable the housing asset formation. We may have quite a lot of cases for the resumption of home ownership schemes. Like first one, we can see the affordability gap. Hong Kong's PDO, the PRR, say the price to income ratio is on the top of world. And there's an increasing growing disparity between homeowners and not yet homeowners. And the supply gap in land and housing, for example. And there is also a strong demand for private housing from the mainland purchasers. Some other cases for against the resumption that would say the home ownership scheme would cause the private housing market to collapse. And the public resources should not be used to assist the people to accumulate their wealth or asset. Then the home ownership scheme will take up sites earmarked for PRH and private housing. And there is a long lead time, we say from 5 to 7 years, that is needed to plan build HOAs. So generally speaking, for the main PPT's contents, that is all for today's main contents. But I want to leave the question here for you to think about the issues, like which one is less efficient? Well, the question of here, which one is more efficient in terms of in cash or in kind, in terms of this alternative, so in efficiency of this. So when we try to compare the in kind and in cash, how do you use this to try to give a short discussion about in cash in kind by using this formula? So I want to invite several students to give your answer. I say give you around 5 or even to 6 minutes to think about the question of which formality is more inefficient or efficient. So I'm going to pronounce your name out and see how many students would give a good answer for this. So let's say around, we say 5 to 6 minutes after that, okay? Okay, I think I want to invite some students to give me the answer for which approach is less efficient in kind or in cache. I hope you're ready. I try to nominate a few names there. Chen Shiqi, can you open your mic? Shiqi.
Hello, Professor. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, yes. What do you think about less efficiency or efficiency? You understand the context, right, Shiqi?
Yeah, but sorry, Professor.
You could not remember the question? I leave some time for you.
I still thinking about it. Sorry.
Okay. When you're ready, you can let me know. How about Chen Kexing? Kexing?
Hello, Professor. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, please.
Sorry, I also need some time to think about it.
Let's try some other students. Fu Yi. How about Fu Yi?
Hello, Professor. Can you
Yeah,
hear me?
you there?
I think the cache is less efficient. From what I just understood, I think the housing versions are more efficient, which should be in the category of in kind. So yes, I think the thing that way is much efficient than the in cache. Them in cache. That's what my opinion.
Okay. But the point is, can you explain by theoretical by using a curve to discuss?
I think I need more time to organize my words.
You can, yes, you can. But the point is like, well, if you have some concerns and that needs some clarification, you can have more figure out. Let's see. Okay. You try to think about it and see other students might have. Let me try to.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Yeah, you can think more. How about the NQY? Mr. NQY. Mr. N, you there? Perhaps not. How about the Tam Chu Ho? Tam Chun Ho. Tam. Are you there? Not there. And Polly E. Polly Tang.
Yes.
Yeah. What do you think about the approaches? Is less efficient?
Actually, I think in cache is more efficient. because that is more attractive.
Why?
Because people like cash more.
Well, I think
sorry.
some students it's not like people. There is some rationale. I just want to maybe I made this clarifications for you to think about this less efficient, because it's very important for today. So which one is more efficient in economic term? Suppose like in the figure we said in the indifference curve analysis, right? Assume that the household will hold consumer with two things. One, the housing services X and non-housing goods. So X and Y, okay? This is budget. They can only consume two things or buy two things, X and Y. With a high indifference curves, which will mean higher level, very higher level of satisfaction, right? So household would enjoy the same amount with different combination of X and Y along each indifference curve. If you still remember the PPT, right? So with the same amount with different combination. So in the absence of public housing program, a household with income Y will consume P1 units of housing goods and P2 units of non-housing goods. If you remember the housing curve. So consumers, suppose the consumer's income is M, the total income, okay. And then the housing service occupy X, and the unit housing services will P1. Non-housing goods is Y, and unit non-housing goods is P2. So the budget line is L1 equals to P1 multiplied X plus P2 multiplied Y. And that, suppose we say, is equals to M. So this is first the budget line, L1 equals to M. M is the total income, okay. So the target consumer, utility with satisfaction level, utility satisfaction level with a maximum U equals to U bracket X and comma Y. So if we say when the supply subsidy is provided, it is supposed that the housing price might be lowered down at T yuan per unit square meters. In the meantime, the price for both housing services X and non-housing goods as Y remains unchanged. So in such a kind of context, the budget line for consumers is L2. So that has got another equation that is P1 minus T, okay, lower down T, and multiply X. This is go with this one, plus P2 multiply Y, and that again to M. So we say L2 is tangent to the indifferent curve U2 at point A, if you remember the lines, okay? And the best consumption point for consumers are XA and YA. A can be substituted into L2 according to this, equations of line, so that we can come up to the equation 3. Okay, PT, P1 minus T, XA plus P2, YA, and that also equals to A, XA and YA. So if the demand subsidy is offered by the government, which can raise the incomes of consumers. So put another way, the income TX can be added into the equation 1. So can be added into this one. And you can see this new line for L3 could be P1 multiplied by X plus P2Y equals M added, so plus TX, right? So this is by the equation 1, we can find this. If we get XA, YA into the equation 3, and then we can get following obtained again. So which means, what putting the economic terms or equations that L2 and L3 would intersect at point A. And in this occasion, LC would be L3 would be highly relevant with the indifference curve of U2 at the point of A, and it would be tangent to U3 at point B. So as the slope of L3 is larger than L2, the slope, we say that judges the utilities degree, and we can get final conclusion that the actually comparative efficiency of U2, that is demand subsidies or in-kind subsidies, will become higher. And this point, it will become mostly satisfied at the point that they may intersect. So that one can compare the things we said about that we mentioned into the importance of that, PPT slides, if you still remember. Let me try to get it back to the PPT slides here. And then you can try to see about what I've just mentioned. Like firstly, this is the budget line, because I changed the line OI and OA. This is the budget line IA. And then with the same I, these consumptions for the other goods, but housing services added AB. They get another, tangent lines, U2. And then once again, in the same U2, and they can get the subsidy, and they can get LP plus, L plus. And then they can get another U3. So that's we can compare which one is more efficient, which is more less efficient by using the economic terms. So, well, I hope you can understand my questions. So, and see whether any students got any, particular answers at this stage. So, and let me try to ask some students about this again, about what do you think about that according to your own experiences. Ni Guo, are you there? Ni Guo, Guo Ni. Are you in the front of your computer?
Hi, Professor.
Yeah.
Okay,
Did you listen? Yeah, you can hear me, right? Good.
I'm not quite sure for this question.
Thank you. But you got to think about this.
But to the best of the knowledge, I think it really depends on different situations.
Okay. I don't think you already get my point. You may think about this later. And how about the Lin Xiaoxuan? Lin Xiaoxuan, you can answer the questions by using economic way to argue which one is less efficient or efficient. Lin Xiaoxuan is not there. How about Wu Di? Hello? Wu Di is not there. Shaohong Wu, Mr. Wu Shaohong.
Hello, Professor.
Yeah, I'm here.
I think I can't answer it in the the microeconomic way, but in my experience, I think that the in-cash subsidy is more efficient than the in-kind subsidy. Because in the situation of the in-kind subsidy, that if government provide some good, the in-kind subsidy, that the quality, they can guarantee the quality of the subsidy, and what's more, the government cannot guarantee that they provide enough kinds of the goods that the citizen really needs.
Okay.
And but in the housing situation, I think that I'm not quite sure, but I think that if the social housing is some kind of in-kind subsidy, I think that the in-kind subsidy is kind of efficient because it worked quite well in Hong Kong.
Well, you're probably right. In terms of this, but might not have the other potential, potential, how to say, differences in the other contexts, I think. Well, thank you for your question, for your answer. At least you have some thoughts about that. I know it's not easy. I'm going to try to upload, the notes that I have met just now to the, Canvas system in the files later. So I hope you will have some, thoughts due to this potential, inefficiency or efficiency, because it's very important. Any questions from the floor so far? If there's no questions, Yao Yu Cheng, can you open your mic, please? You mean you don't understand this part? What do you mean by don't understand? Which part you don't understand? Hello? Can you please open your mic? So in that case, we can try to have Q&A session now.
Okay, hello, Professor. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Mr. Yao.
No, I'm Huang Zi. I'm not him. But I have a question on this the economic model.
Okay, please. Yeah.
Actually, I'm not sure whether I fully understand it, but I have some question on whether it would be difference on the market situation about whether the housing market in Hong Kong or in certain places is a responsive market or non-responsive market, because I think that model may perform very well in a responsive market where the for instance, when the government provide in-cash subsidies, and then the income raises and the demand may also raise, so that there may be more housing supply at the market. But in the housing market, such as in Hong Kong, which is not that responsive. For instance, if you put some in-cash subsidies in Hong Kong, then when the demand for the housing demand raise and the housing supply may not raise efficiently or responsibly, and so that the result may be that the housing price will go on, that the market may somehow become more crazy. So that in this sense, I may think that for this kind of market, an in-kind subsidy may be more efficient in terms of solving the problem. But I also agree that the in-kind subsidy may somehow be more costly in the economic sense, because that may increase the opportunity cost on the and revenue. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that you provide a potential wheels from your side, right? That's a very good point you made. But the question is, you don't understand that whether the Hong Kong housing's public housing program would be make this a point, or why you say even it is inefficient, why Hong Kong still use it? Is that your question?
No, my question is that because from the economic view that you have explained that the in-cash subsidies may be more efficient, but I wonder whether if in the housing market such as Hong Kong, that it is not responsive, so that when
responsive.
the market, I mean, when the housing demand raises, in some market, the housing supply may also raise, but in the Hong Kong market, maybe when housing demand raises because of your in-cash subsidy, then the supply may still remain the same. Then if this is the case, I think the housing price may go up. So that wonder if this is the situation why the in-cash subsidy is still more efficient or not. So this is my question.
Well, I'm not quite sure about your key point, but I think what you mentioned is not responsive. It means, well, according to your idea, it is less efficient to run that we already know is less efficient. Why bother we try to go for this? For public housing, in case we say that they have the other choices. So that have to incur 2 points. One is applicability, 2 is affordability, and also 3 is whether in efficiency or efficiency. So when the government make a decision, they may have multiple choices of options, which make it hard to have the very finalized, decision of one or a decision of B. So I hope you can understand this. If still not, after I can try to upload these 2 approaches of explanations, both the Chinese version and English version, to the Canvas system. If still
yeah. I think I got some sense. So thank you very much. But a small remaining question is that because when we cast the efficiency, so that when we compare the cost and the benefits, so that's what we call the efficiency. So what is the benefit in terms of this issue? Is it the benefit means that the housing problem is somehow solved and more people, they can enjoy a better housing enjoyment, or the benefits is something else? Because if the benefits is housing enjoyment, then when in-cash subsidies, then may increase the housing price. So that may not be that may not finally increase people's housing affordability or housing enjoyment. But if the benefits is something others, then that's maybe another story, and that's maybe something very important for me to understand this. Yeah, thank you.
Oh yeah, you're right, definitely. That's a very good point so far that you made. Well, I hope that you're going to read some economic, books. If some students still cannot comprehend, this is very actually original when you read Samuelson or some other economists. They have a better explanation when we're talking about the utility and what is utility, what is tangent, what is a specific curve for economic approach or views. It will do you a lot of good if you have such kind of interest, rather than just but I understand some students don't have such kind of background, so it's pretty hard for them to comprehend. So try your best to get more comprehension for that. There are some also videos, interesting and very important videos on the YouTube. If you just look into saying the indifference curve and into the YouTube, you can find a lot. Okay, I hope that will be helpful. But
Yeah,
without without any delay, let's try to make it a day. Today for the lecture part, we will go to the tutorial part at 8:30. So I think for my tutorial groups. So we'd like to see you later. Bye. That's all for today's lecture. Bye-bye.